Okay, I'm sitting here with Mark, our senior tutor from Three Little Wishes today. Mark has been an inspiration to both our students and our tutors, and particularly me. I met Mark 14 years ago when he was indeed my tutor and was the reason that I got into photography. And certainly he is the main reason why Three Little Wishes has managed to succeed.
Yeah, very kind of you. Thank you. Well done.
Okay, both me and everyone else are dying to hear some stories.
How are you?
So can you, starting right at the very beginning,
Yes.
how did you actually get into photography?
Well, I started as a graphic designer at Wellington Polytech. And let me just tell you, this is 70 BC, before computers. There was no such thing as computers. And ask any graphic designer these days that if you want to do graphic design, you need a computer.
Yeah.
But in those days, everything was done by hand and illustrations. And
Yeah.
you had to be good at pen work and everything else. And it was a 4-year diploma course. I don't think I even got to year 2 before I discovered photography. A chap there called Warwick Teague, who was such an inspiration. He was as mad as a hatter. And he had this Hasselblad camera, which none of us knew what a Hasselblad was. But
Right.
as most of us in the profession will know, that's one of the most expensive cameras in the world. And even in those days, $20,000 got you a body, a back, and maybe one lens. So he had a
Wow.
few lenses.
Oh, God.
These days they're up about
Yeah,
$80,000.
something horrendous.
The digital version. Anyway, he was so inspirational in the sense that his teaching method got me inspired, apart from the darkroom work. So I could have a concept that I wanted to do in graphic design, like let's do an ad on something,
Yeah.
an advertisement. And you'd sit there illustrating, doing storyboards and God knows what. And then after about a week or two, you got bored senseless. And you still had a lot of work to do. Whereas
Yeah.
photography, you could go out and take your shots, go in the dark room, do
Yeah.
composite work and do some really exciting stuff. So for me, it was not only a time saver, but it was quite exciting to be in the dark room. And then with Warwick coming around with his bugle, and, we often
His
used to
bugle?
yeah, he used to have a bugle. And you could hear him coming, especially after classes. We'd all go rush to the dark rooms to secure an enlarger. And you could hear him in the background throughout the halls of the Polytech in Wellington, this bugle,
Yeah.
this lonely bugle sound coming. You knew he was coming into the dark room. But his teaching methods were great. His first lesson was he set up a large format camera, a 4x5-inch view camera. And he said, I want you to figure this camera out and tell me how it works. And he said, there's lots of movements. You'll notice that the lens goes up and down.
Yeah.
It swings left and right. It swings forward and backwards. And likewise, the film back does the same thing. He says, try and figure out why that is. And I'll come back in half an hour. And as a group of you, there was about 6 of us, I think, we thought we'd do a brainstorm. And that's exactly what happened. And we came back in half an hour. And we kind of figured out what it would do, but we weren't quite sure why. And he said, well done, you didn't break anything. And that was his philosophy of teaching, that
Right.
he didn't show what he could do. It was more
What the
we
students
could try
could
and do.
Yeah.
And he was very positive in his critique. He didn't beat us or anything like that. It was in those days.
Didn't flatten your enthusiasm.
So yes, that was my first inspiration. And
Yeah.
Then all I wanted to do was photography. I went to the head of department and he said, there's no such thing as photography majors in graphic design, so sorry, unless you do a fine arts, visual arts at Elam or Ilam in Christchurch.
Right. So that's what you did. You went off to Christchurch?
No, I had to go to Australia. I couldn't stand the
Oh,
idea.
right. Okay.
I wanted to
Okay.
do commercial photography. I
Yeah.
didn't want to be an arty-farty
Yeah.
party person.
Yeah.
So I had to go to Australia to find a course that I wanted to enroll in,
Right. Okay.
which I eventually did.
Yeah. So how long was that course? That was just for a couple of years, and then you went
I
out
was
into
off,
the
yeah.
world.
And the one in Australia, the course, it was 2 years, and I just rolled up at the College of Art. I was going to go to RMIT, but Melbourne was rather cold, and I was a surfer.
Right.
So
yeah.
Brisbane's College of Art was closer to Noosa,
Yeah.
where I
Makes
loved
sense.
surfing. And anyway, I went along to the College of Art, said, I'd like to enroll in your 2-year certificate course. There was no such thing as a diploma in photography.
Right.
All you could get was a certificate,
Okay.
and that was it. In 2 years, and I said, I'd like to enroll. And they just laughed and said, well, join the queue of 800 people that apply, and we only accept 30.
Wow.
2 classes of 15, that's it. And where's your portfolio? And we accept you on that merit.
Yeah.
And also you have to be working full time with a professional photography institution or person.
Wow.
So tail between my legs up to Noosa, which was quite nice. I
Yeah.
got my portfolio together every year
Yeah.
and went back. I had to get a job. I ended up at Queensland Institute of Technology in a bio, I wouldn't say biopharmaceutical, biohazard. And they had an electron microscope, a scanning electron microscope. And my job was to process the large format negatives
Right.
from that SEM.
So this was the job you were doing while you were at college studying.
And then I could go along to the college and say, can I be one of your students? And they accepted me on that basis.
Yeah.
But then, after I got in, I went to an advertising agency, and by God, did they throw me in the deep end. And that was it. I was working from 8:30 in the morning till 5:30 in the evening. On the bus out to the college, started at 6 and finished at 9:30, 4 nights a week for 2 years.
Heavy going.
So you were working during the day and
And
having to
then,
do a class as well. So only 2 of us ended up graduating with honours. A lot of people bailed out. And so we got the top marks of the college. And they turned around and offered me a teaching position. I said, hell no, I want to go back to New Zealand and change all the photography, which was absolutely terrible at the time.
Yeah. So what did you do when you came back to New Zealand?
I lasted a week. I shouldn't mention the company, and I won't, but there was a company that had this chap that thought product photography consisted of a series of wooden steps, probably a metre wide, and he would place blue velvet, red velvet, pink velvet, black velvet, and put the products on different steps.
Right, okay.
And that was his idea of product photography, and I'd suffered 2 years of the heavy, disciplined and strict oversight. And I lasted a week, and I went back and I said, look, I'll take that teaching job, because I was quite delusioned. And they said that teaching job is gone, but the guy has taken it, his job's up for grabs. It turned out to be David Jones Advertising.
Right, okay.
And that's when I...
Oh, so that's when you went and joined David Jones and did all their products.
That was my first official professional job.
Right, okay.
And you're only as good as your last exposure.
Right.
And Bill Robinson, who it was called Robinson and Jones, he said, if you mess up with any one of my 8x10-inch transparencies, this was an 8x10-inch camera.
Yeah.
We had 5x4s as well.
Right.
We had Hasselblads, that was a minimum format size. So these transparencies were $60 each, which in today's language...
That's a lot of money, hey?
Like 1975, that's when that was. They were about $600.
Yes, yeah.
And you had 2 exposures. You had the correct exposure, and you had one slightly underexposed. So having to learn under pressure, 10,000 odd products a week.
10,000.
Yeah, imagine going into farmers and seeing everything in farmers and saying, I'd like to, it always had to be photographed.
A week?
A week. So a truck would turn up, there were 6 of us working there. Probably every week, one photographer was fired because he messed up.
Yeah.
Or she messed up.
God, that's a phenomenal number of products to have to be photographed.
Yeah, so we had layouts, and we had to do it exactly the way the layouts were designed. Yeah.
Jeez. How long did you stay with that one?
Probably over a couple of years,
Oh,
because
so
I was really cutting my teeth on this,
okay.
and I learnt so much in such a short amount of time. As compounded everything I'd learnt, was studied, but in a real practical sense.
So after David Jones, is that when you went to Papua New Guinea?
I'm just trying to think of the sequence there. Let me think. Yes, I think it was. There was an international job advertised for principal government photographer for the Prime Minister's Department of Papua New Guinea.
Yeah.
And the funny part about that was I was so keen to get this job. I turned up with a portfolio to see a Mr. Fopp, who had flown out from England to interview the Antipodes, the plebs down here.
This strange man from some
But there's
weird
a whole lot of
country.
people.
Yeah.
Australasia he was
Yeah.
interviewing. And we were supposed to meet at a hotel, and I had a Seaco diver's watch, which I checked. He's here on the 30th. I've got to be at the hotel at 1. So, but a Seaco's diver's watch, you had to manually set the date.
Right. Okay.
So I was a day late, wasn't I?
Oh God.
So I turned up the next day to do
you're
this
kidding me.
interview, and of course
He'd gone.
he'd gone. Mr. Fopp's checked out. So I was just about to give up, and I thought, no, just follow it up. So I managed to get hold of the Papua New Guinean consulate in Wellington, asked if I could contact Mr. Fopp. And he said he's in Western Australia at the moment. Here's his phone number. Remember, there's 5 hours difference. So I phoned him, and of course, we had the interview over the phone.
Right. Okay.
And it was about 2 months later, I get this telegram saying, position for principal government photographer of Papua New Guinea, successful, how soon can you start?
Just like that.
When I did eventually catch up with Mr. Fopp, I said to him, how the hell did I get that job when I missed the appointment?
Yeah.
And he said, that's exactly why you got the job. He said, nothing works on time up in Papua New Guinea.
Brilliant. Love
Everything
it.
falls to
Love
custom.
it. Yeah.
But you persisted, you kept
Yeah.
pushing it.
Yeah.
And that's the person we want up here.
Excellent. So you were there for a fair number of years,
Yeah,
weren't you?
just over 2.5,
Yeah.
3 years almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exciting.
3 years, yeah.
Many, many stories to be told, I'm sure.
Indeed. And then after that position, I went back to Australia, and I was teaching at the college I studied at.
Yeah.
I finally took up their
Oh,
position
you did?
part-time.
Yeah.
And I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. And then there was a job for DSIR, Department of Scientific and Industrial Research. And I got that job and then became a scientific forensic photographer.
So you had a very varied
Oh, yes.
career, really, haven't you, Mark? You know?
Indeed.
Which is brilliant. Sort of lots of different specialties, including teaching, etc.,
Wow.
etc., and living in lots of exotic places as well. Really.
Indeed. I decided that I didn't want to be a photographer that had a style, because
Yeah.
being a successful photographer and my outlook was to be able to manifest anybody's style. Once you understood how they did something,
Yeah.
and you could say, well, I want a crunchy look, or I want a soft romantic look, or I want a particular style that a photographer might be able to do. And a lot of the advertising agencies I work with would have a collection of photographers that worked on different styles, but they would only get a call once every 3 months or so,
Yeah.
because the styles weren't often that required, if you like.
Yeah.
So when someone came out and said, well, we want this look, I could say, I can do that, and would achieve that. And so that was the point of difference.
All this experience has got to be the main reason that you're such an incredible tutor and have managed to pass on so much to everyone who's knocked on your door for tuition. It's true. It's
Yeah.
very true. From a teaching perspective, do you feel that that was something that came so naturally, and you wanted to pass on that information to up and coming individuals?
I get a lot of pleasure out of seeing younger people, or anybody that gets empowered by photography. On the simple basis, they have a passion to do it. They have the will to do something, but they can't quite get the technical aspect to it, or something. But teaching never came automatically. In Australia, I had to do a certificate in adult teaching, which was really good for me. It's a whole year study. And I learnt some very interesting things there. But one of the things I learnt in New Guinea, which was interesting, my responsibilities were for the Prime Minister. When he said, "Snap, let's go somewhere," we had to go. And then I had my staff of about maybe, it varied between 6 and 14.
Yeah.
And then I had training them. And then I had to train other journalists that were sporadically placed around Papua New Guinea. And the only way you could get to those people was by air or helicopter or boat.
Yeah.
And so these remote places, often it was too difficult for me to go up. And of course, they often didn't have things in place. So I decided that it would be better for them to come to Port Moresby, and I would have a class for them.
Right.
Specifically how to get a story with cameras. And my first class was hilarious. They all were sitting in this room, and I'm rattling on about the refractive index of particular glass, which created different focal lengths. I'm going rattling on as if I was back in my college days. And I noticed everybody falling asleep. Heads on benches, yawning, and not at all interested, sketching little sketches.
Yeah.
And I thought, boy, they must be getting bored senseless here. I better have a coffee break. So, right, guys, we're stopping for a coffee break. And anyway, as they were filing out the door, one of them said, "Mr. Ryan, we don't want to learn anything about this refractive stuff. We just want to know how to take a good photo." And I thought, wow, that's straight between the eyes.
Oh, yeah,
and
that's
bloody
right.
perfect.
Total honesty. Yeah.
So I thought, how am I going to do this? This is just, come on, Mark, keep it simple. How would you make that happen? And I don't know if you remember, Debbie, but in those days, we used to have a Kodak packet of film. There was a cardboard box, and inside that cardboard box, when you split it open, there was a plastic tube. And you flip the lid of that plastic tube and out came the film, you put it in your camera, wound it on, and away you went. Now, the actual cardboard box had a very expensive diagram in there. It cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in those days to produce this simple diagram. And it had 200 ISO film, and it had an icon of the sun.
Yeah.
And it said, set your camera to 1/250th of a second at f11. And then it had the same sun icon underneath with a little bit of cloud coming through half of it. And it said, set your camera at 125th of a second at f11. And then it had just cloud. I said, set your camera at 1/60th of a second at f11.
Yeah.
Wow, wonderful. Everybody was enthralled, happy as.
Yeah.
They went away completely happy.
Yeah.
And they did come up with some really good results.
Yeah. They just wanted simplicity, really, didn't they?
Just had to interpret the lighting.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that to me was absolutely a breakthrough in teaching.
Yeah.
Just keep it bloody simple.
Well, that's been very much the thing with the way that you and the other tutors have kept it with Three Little Wishes, hasn't it? It's just been the simplicity of teaching. Take away the really difficult wording and things from
terminology and
that's right.
And like the scientific aspect of apertures and ISO sensitivity and all that.
Well, it sounds so.
subject.
Well, yeah, and it also sounds really scary if you don't know much about it.
Hell yes.
Yeah.
What is F8 and what's the difference between F8 and F11? Or
well, yeah. One of our tutors the other day reminded me of a very amusing story you had told him about a time in New Guinea with a volcano.
yes, indeed. What had happened was the United Nations had sent some volcanologists, contracted some volcanologists to check on two volcanoes, or one in particular in Rabaul, which had blown up before, and it was showing all the signs of doing it again.
Right.
And even my boss, the Prime Minister, lived in Rabaul, and he couldn't get the Premier there to organise an evacuation program. That's all they wanted. And he didn't believe this thing was going to blow. So myself and these volcanologists got together, and they wanted some photographic evidence of how this thing was going to be really dangerous in the next year or two. And,
Right. So he wanted you to go up the mountain, basically,
with the
take...
volcanologists.
Right, okay.
And and all during the night I arrived, it was just earthquakes all night in the Ralph. This thing was rumbling away, and in fact, even the airport had a straight runway, but it started to bulge in the middle.
God, how terrifying.
And so when you're running along the runway, taking off, you hit this bulge, and you still weren't in midair, and you came crashing down, and you had to keep going until you got the airspeed. So it was
Jeez.
quite a hilarious sort of... But when we went up to the mountain, we had some people carrying all the gear, including the heaviest tripod I've ever bought, which is the Manfrotto, because I had medium format cameras with me as well, Hasselblad.
Yeah.
And because the ground's moving, and this thing's going up and down, so we had some porters carrying our gear, which was really good. So just with t-shirts and shorts and walking boots, we climbed this enormous volcano. It took us 4 hours to get up, you know.
God.
And we got to the top, and the smell of sulfur was extreme. And we asked the porters, we're really thirsty after that 4 hours. Where's the water? Oh, we left it behind.
You're kidding me.
Yeah, they left all the water behind. So as dry as our mouths were, we had to put on masks and breathing apparatus, basically, and abseil down into the mouth of the volcano.
Wow.
Which was steaming all sorts of fumes. And of course, there was sulfuric acid in there.
Yeah.
And of course, I was watching my tripod being lowered down separately, because you couldn't really carry it and abseil at the same time. It was being lowered down on a rope, and I could see all the paint peeling off. What's it doing to our lungs?
Yeah,
we had breathing
geez.
apparatus, which was great. But everything that was metal or corrosive
Yeah.
it just dissolved, basically. It's just, you're working yourself in a corrosive
Well,
environment.
yeah.
And anyway,
God, you must have been terrified, Mark.
No, well, I think I just wanted to get on with the job. How long's this thing going to go? Because no one knew. So we set up tilt meters, and then every so often the thing would rumble, and we'd feel the ground shake, and the tilt meter would operate, and we'd show that. And then we'd show the pH testing and, of the acidity and the alkaline testing, and there was a few other tests we did.
Yeah.
And then we hightailed it out of there. We abseiled back out. And then when we got to the top, we were so thirsty and dehydrated. It was
God, I
dangerous.
can imagine. Yeah.
And when we got we got down to the bottom of the volcano, which only took us about maybe an hour and a half, because we were galloping down because we were so thirsty. And we, for some reason, when you're looking at a tropical paradise water and you're thirsty, you just feel like you want to drink it.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And you can't drink salt water. So these local guys who were feeling pretty guilty scurried up some coconut trees and cracked off about maybe a dozen coconuts, in which they opened as if we would open a normal can of Coke. And we drank this most cool, refreshing coconut milk.
Must have been the best drink in the world,
Best
I can
drink
imagine.
in the world if you're ever thirsty and dehydrated. It really was.
So when did the volcano, what happened to the volcano?
Well,
in the
that
end?
test,
Did
yes.
that-
The report was compiled for the United Nations, and all my photographs were part of that report. And I think I had just left New Guinea, and then it blew up.
Right, okay.
And the evacuation plan went according to, the Premier finally realised that he had to do something. And of course the harbour was, the whole city was covered in ash, and houses collapsed and stuff. But luckily it didn't. The magma, the pyroclastic flow didn't affect the city, which was good.
Right.
But it did blow, yes.
So you saved a lot of lives, really, with your report.
Yeah,
You did.
Part of a team, and that's what. And as I was talking to Colin the other day about scientific photography, it's not me doing the work as such. It's me being part of a team that facilitates an end result. So, and that's working with a team and testing things out till it does work, and then voila, you've got it.
So what's your advice to anybody starting out?
Okay.
You know, not a novice. Say they've got an interest in photography. They've bought a camera.
Yes.
What's your advice?
Okay. First of all, they have to have a passion or an interest in photography, and that sounds very basic. But like most jobs, you often get kids that are given a camera for their Christmas present or something because their parents thought they might like doing that. But they may not. And they're kind of pressured to carry on with something. And if they
That's
don't
so
have
wrong,
that
isn't it?
interest or passion, then it's going to fall over no matter what. So first of all, they've got to have that passion or that interest.
Yeah.
And then I think you have to aspire to a very high quality. Never go for mediocrity or someone down the road. Auntie Jill was a great photographer. She's look at these lovely portraits of you as a baby. You know, but, you know, great photos. But if you're getting into the commercial world where you're competing against other photographers, you have to make a slight difference in your statement, and you've got to have that edge, whatever that edge may be. It can be a style, but generally it all comes back to a skill-based attitude, where if it doesn't quite meet your standard, then do it until it does.
Yeah. It's also about having confidence in your own work as well,
And that's
isn't it?
the big issue. It took me years to believe that I was actually a professional photographer, and it wasn't until after many publications and winning awards and stuff, I suddenly said, hey, maybe I am a professional photographer. So the confidence is a big aspect.
I think it's very hard to look at your work and think that it's any good, really, isn't it?
Well,
You know? Not your work, I
it's
mean
arbitrary.
work. Work in general.
No, it is arbitrary, and everybody has their own
Yeah.
taste. in
I mean, I
photography.
know recently you helped one of our students enormously with helping her gain her confidence, the
Yes.
young woman who was doing landscape work.
Yes, and flowers and stuff. Yeah,
Yeah. And she just needed that little
she
extra,
did indeed,
didn't she?
and I think it was, again, it wasn't me showing her how to do something. It was giving her the confidence to produce something and try something a little bit different until it works, not just guessing it and not just winging it through.
Yeah.
You know.
And now she's flown, hasn't
Well,
she, really? She's doing really well.
When I asked her, what did you want to do with your photography? She said, I want to be, I think this is, you may have to ask her that question, but I think from memory, she wanted to be a fine art or photographer and to be able to exhibit her work.
Yeah.
And that's a big ask.
Oh, God, yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that's a big
Yeah.
jump. And she ended up doing just that. She, at her first exhibition, I was as proud as punch,
Yeah.
and so was her husband.
Yeah.
She's-
Oh, it's hugely satisfying, isn't it?
Just wonderful.
Yeah.
Big, delicious prints at this art gallery, and that was very satisfying.
No,
Yeah.
very cool.
Yeah,
Mark, thank you so much.
you're welcome.
It's been really interesting. This lovely man is going to be retiring, unfortunately.
Yes.
Our huge loss. But it's been a pleasure.
No, it's been a pleasure actually working with you, Tippy, and I must say that Three Little Wishes has made my life very enjoyable, because
Thank
it gives
you.
me the chance to give back to people, which is, and you can't sit on the stuff forever by yourself.
No, it's true.
You're hiding
That's
it
true.
under a bushel. Why?
Yeah.
You know, spread it out. Get
Well,
it
you've
out.
been very inspiring.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Debbie.